my alien adventure. Actually, it wasn't my alien adventure. It was Terry and I's alien adventure. Or adventures. I'd say about 5 years ago. Terry and I drive all over in our RV. We have a 40-foot RV, and we pull our car and we go all over the country. I've got almost 200,000 miles seeing our beautiful country. But we were in Nevada. I came out of Las Vegas, and we were heading northeast. And we drove on this road and had a Y. And we looked, and one way had nothing on it, and the other had extraterrestrial highway. And it had pictures of aliens on it. And we looked at it, and I looked at Terry, and I says, which one are we going on? And we both pointed at the same time. We're going on the extraterrestrial highway. So we took off on the extraterrestrial highway. And we drove, and we drove. And it was about as exciting as any normal road on the desert. You see nothing. I mean, this was even one of those ones that didn't have many cactuses. And we drove, and we drove. And then all of a sudden we came over this rise, and we saw a building. So we drove down to the building. And we looked, and there was all kinds of alien pictures all over the building. And they had a little de-dunk store, you know, where you can get little Cokes and that. So we went in, and we drove up, and it was closed. Well, I looked at Terry, and I says, well, I've got to do my normal responsible activity right now. I'm going back and taking a nap. So I went back, and I took a nap, and she seemed to doze off, too. And we got up, and we drove. And somewhere along the way, it seemed like time sort of disappeared. It was like, all of a sudden, we're at the end of the road. Like, wow, that's terrible. Well, first of all, in the desert, it's not terrible because you're done. But I love driving the desert anyway. It's just so calming, and you can think, and you float along in the universe. Well, a week later, 1 week, and I felt this thing on the back of my neck. It was like a bulb, like a, you know, like you get a cyst. I said, sweetie, I'm getting a big cyst on the back of my neck. She says, I am too. I said, wow. So I says, this is a little frightening. It got real big as I felt it. Well, let's go see Dave. Well, we have a really good friend, Dave Gorsalowski, and he's a dermatologist. He's right here in Fremont. And we went to Dave. I says, Dave, I think we got alien implants. Dave looked at me, and he knows me. He says, probably, Roland. Let me take a look at them. So Dave looks at it. He says, these are really weird, Roland. And he felt around, and he did all this stuff. And he says, I don't think we should touch them. I says, okay, Dave, I'll just keep transmitting. So every day I would push it, and I'd say, download, 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 3 times. I figured that was all I needed, you know. Well, it went on for about 8 months, and then all of a sudden, Terry and I, not all of a sudden, we arranged it. We're taking off for our normal trip across country. We go down to Texas, and we head back up to into Paducah, Tennessee for our family, and we head up to northern Minnesota. I says, let's go, and this time we're going to stop at your old hometown, because she sort of avoided it for years. But this time I got her. It's in Cowsey, New Mexico. It's right on the eastern border of New Mexico. And it's like the rest of New Mexico. Well, actually, New Mexico actually is pretty interesting. But this is about the desert part of New Mexico. But we went in there, and it was very fascinating because they still had her grade school up. And they must have torn it down or not torn it down, but abandoned it a few years later, because they have a law against abandoning stuff. Already? Oh, extend it, it's going to be a little longer. And so it says, so we went in and we found her. We actually saw her old classroom she was in. It was a green board. They had a green board where they write on. It was like, wow. Fascinating you're here. He said, you got all these ties here. You're native. Wow, that's wonderful. So we took off. And guess what? This is about 40 miles from Area 52. About a week later, I had another one growing. And Terry says, I don't. I says, that's because you were native. They probably grew you there. So then I had to walk along, and I had to do 2 transmissions a day. Down, down, and so I went on, and I got back and talked to Dave. And I said, Dave, we got to come in and see you. I says, Dave, I really have a problem. I says, I have 2 alien races in me, and they're fighting. It's getting all infected. He says, wow. I said, I never knew that Area 52 and the aliens in Nevada were 2 different races. I just found that out. So we went in. And Dave looked at it and he says, Roland, I think that's going to have to come out. I says, I hope they aren't mad, Dave. So he proceeded to take him out. I says, look at him. Go look at him in the microscope, Dave. He says, I'll be right back, Roland. So he went back. He came back. He says, there was a little speck. I couldn't figure out what it was. Roland? And I said, oh, I knew it, Dave. I hope they aren't mad. And so I didn't have any. And Terry always goes with me to the dermatologist, and she was sitting in the corner, and she looks at me and she says, don't worry, guys. I'm the only one left, and I'm the only one that gets to talk to him now. Thank you.